Hello and welcome back to Achilles Speaks. Today, I wanted to talk about the Democratic Party and why it doesn't seem to be meeting the moment. And that's not just according to me, but numerous polls have shown that a majority, or at least plurality, of Democrats are dissatisfied with their own congressional leaders, thinking that they are not taking enough action to counter Trump, not meeting the moment, that they don't have the right rhetoric, the right vigor, that they don't have the fight in them that many in the base want them to have against Trump and Elon Musk and Doge and all of these initiatives that Trump has been putting forth. There was a recent article from Lakshya Jain, who I think is a great political commentator, and I will link the article down below because I would encourage you to read it and also look at some of his other pieces of discourse. He wrote an article about this, about how a lot of the Democratic base is dissatisfied, and he shows three polls, including the CNN poll, which shows that 73% of members of the Democratic Party are dissatisfied with how congressional Democrats are fighting Trump, which, again, that is an insane number. And the Data for Progress poll also shows something similar. So he talks about how it's very fascinating and surprising how relatively quiet Democrats have been in organizing public opposition to Trump, especially with all of the rhetoric this past election about how big of a threat he is. Um, and Lakshya has some interesting points about why Democrats might be doing this. He talks about how this could be a smart political approach, actually. Um, and that it is logical from a game theory perspective that the more the majority dominates the airwaves, the more unpopular it gets, and the more the public wants to push back. This is because Americans are generally adverse to massive change and tend to punish governmental overreach. In fact, that's a large part of why midterms are so bad for the party in power. So, he thinks that this could be an intentional strategy by congressional Democrats. He says that's why the Democratic Party's leadership has adopted the new strategy of simply waiting for a blunder while letting Trump exhaust the American public, especially because they don't have any real leverage beyond lawsuits to wield in opposition. This approach is obviously angering a lot of the Democratic base. And I think that this could be an interesting strategy, and I actually don't think it would be the worst strategy. As much as I want Democrats to be countering Trump, it I would be interested to see how this plays out going into the future. But part of me is skeptical that Democrats are thinking this strategically, rather than just kind of blundering the moment and floundering after their loss in November. But as much as a lot of people in the Democratic Party have given Representatives Jeffries some flack for saying that the Democratic Party doesn't really have leverage, it is mostly true that the Republicans won in November, whether you like it or not, and they won it in a free and a fair election, so they do have a level of a mandate. Granted, I do think that they're overreaching and doing things that a lot of the people that voted for Republicans didn't think they would actually do, but that's a whole nother discussion. I do think that so far a lot of the lawsuits have been successful. Even today, there was a court order reinstating thousands of workers that Elon Musk's Doge had previously fired. And there have been numerous other court cases that Democrats have also won. So, actually, behind the scenes in these court cases, Democrats actually are winning, whether or not they're putting up more of a fighting stance in public. And this is interesting, but it could be playing out. Here's a polling average from The Economist. There are numerous different polling averages, and they are all slightly different, but this does kind of encompass generally what the trend is for most polling averages, where Trump's approval rating kind of peaked around the election or a little bit before and a little bit after, but ever since he's been elected, it has been going down, and he is now net negative. The majority of reputable poll compilations have all agreed on this, that Trump has been entering into negative territory in terms of approval rating, showing that perhaps this strategy is working. And it's not just Lakshya who's saying this, it's also Carville, who said that right now what the Democrats need to do is play possum, be strategic. He said, I want the party to be measured, to give the impression that they understand the grave risk that the country is in. Which is interesting because just a few weeks before he said that, he published an op ed that, quote, this year the Democratic Party leadership must convene and publish a creative, popular, and bold economic agenda and proactively take back our economic turf. Go big, go populist, stick to economic progress, and force them to oppose what they cannot be for, in unison. So this is an interesting turn, perhaps, from him, or perhaps these strategies are actually in line with each other. Um, there is a chance that he wants the party to play possum now, but eventually start getting the fight back up. I do think that if Democrats don't get the fight back up, as Lake Shia talks about, I think the Democratic Party does have a real risk of a Tea Party movement in 2026, where they're going to see Democrats who don't have a lot of bite to them, who are a little bit bland, who aren't fighting back, and also potentially older Democrats, because I think there's a bit of anger about how old congressional leadership is. I think that there's a real chance that if the Democratic Party does not get its shit together, that it is going to face a sort of Tea Party movement, and that a lot of incumbent Democrats will be found flat-footed in primaries, perhaps surprisingly. Although, looking at it now, I don't think it's going to be surprising. But to be fair to Democrats in leadership, there is a long ways until the midterm. Trump has only been in office for a couple months now, a little under a couple months. We still have over a year before midterm season really starts to kick off, with more people running for office and the campaign season starts to kick off again. That's a long time in the political world, and a lot can happen in between that time. So the Democrats definitely still do have the opportunity to pick up this rhetoric and kind of prevent any sort of Tea Party movement from happening. They could still very well do that. But if they don't do that, then I think they really do run the risk of angering the base and having a lot of incumbent Democrats lose their seats and lose their primaries in 2026, at least more than what would happen in a quote-unquote average or normal cycle. It could be an interesting strategy, like for the reasons that Lexia talked about. And even further, I do think there is something about how this apparent lack of meeting the moment has really lit a fire under a lot of Democrats' asses. And they're going out to the town halls, they're going out, they're getting active again. And there is something about having the base fired up and having more of a bottom-up approach rather than a top-down approach coming from congressional leadership. I think a movement is stronger when it is bottom-up. It would help Democrats more in the long term than a top-down approach. So that could be another potential benefit of this strategy. But again, I want to emphasize, I'm not 100% convinced that this is the strategy, or that this is how Democrats are thinking, or at the very least, that everyone in the party is on board. Because even today, what we're seeing is anger and in-party fighting because of the Trump spending bill, which Democrats were originally going to block, but now Chuck Schumer came out and said that he's going to vote for it. And as of right now, again, things could change. As of right now, it seems that there are probably the votes to pass Trump's spending bill now, where at least 8 Democrats are going to hop on board and join Republicans in passing it, including Schumer. This is not going over well. Here are some responses to this news, and of course, X is not representative of the whole country or real life, but this does give you kind of an idea of what like resist libs or kind of very active party members, very in-tune party members are thinking. Time to pass the torch. Schumer always caves. Unfucking believable. Grow some balls. AOC for like primary him basically. This is why you lose. Dems need a major change. Coward, coward. There was a lot of cowards. Pathetic. Caving to Trump is worse. Chuck Schumer is a sellout. This is exactly what Republicans were hoping for. Shame on Chuck Schumer. Go away, Chuck Schumer. I could have given so many more of these types of responses because they were widespread. And there was an article published also recently that said that some Democratic senators are, quote, furious at Schumer for not having a strategy and message to counter the House Republican bill. This is crazy. And it does put into question a little bit that theory that Lexia was putting forth. Are Democrats really thinking that strategically in this moment? Are they unified behind a strategic vision to take a step back for a while and then eventually come out roaring? I'm not sure, because a government spending bill does seem doesn't seem, it is a very important piece of legislation that Democrats should not just roll over on. Even if they were employing a strategy of sitting back, this is not the type of legislation that you would sit back on. This is something that you would take action on. And again, you're seeing some tweets. Here's a tweet. I think Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, each in their own way, are badly misreading this moment. And I don't think that they're the right congressional leaders for the Democratic Party right now. And I hate to say it, but unless I see change, unless I see a change in vision and strategy and direction, I agree. I agree with this take. I don't think that they're right for the party right now. I think they have completely misread the pulse of the party. They have misread this moment. And it just comes off as blunders. And I don't know why this is happening. And it's really unfortunate. But luckily, Democrats still do have time to get their shit together before midterm season. But Trump is in office. And if the Democratic Party is going to say he's a threat, then they need to also act like it and not just roll over to all of these initiatives. It is incredibly disappointing that this is the case. But it's not all doom and gloom in the Democratic Party. There are some, I think, shining lights. I mean, in my last video, I talked about Bernie Sanders going on these rallies, these tours across the nation. I think that is perfect. I think he's doing great. And it's not just him. AOC's also offered to go into Republican districts, and here Tim Walz just said this week that he's hitting the road, traveling the red states across the country to lend a megaphone to the people. I think that this is great. I think Democrats need to continue to do this. I think also there's been a couple examples this week of Democrats being more forceful in their rhetoric, in their tone. There was an example of where Representative McBride was misgendered by a Republican, and a Democratic congressman came into her defense quite forcibly. That went viral. There's another video that went viral from Representative John Larson, railing in a very animated nature against the Republicans' kind of acquiescence to Trump and Musk.
Saying you will do whatever Elon Musk and Donald Trump tell you to do. Where's the independence of the committee? Where's the legislature? We're an equal branch of government. And you start off with a blather, and yet look at the empty seats here. Where's Elon Musk? I'm sure he's a genius and is a very credible person because of the wealth he's accumulated. But that does not put him above the law or the responsibility to come before this committee in this Congress. If he's so great, if these plans and all the fraud and abuse that he's found are so eminent, why isn't he here explaining it?
And I think that this rhetoric is what we should be doing. I think the Democratic Party needs to project confidence in its own vision. I feel like for so long, we have seemed weak and feckless, ineffective, and not strong. And I feel like it's also seemed like we cower behind our own values, apologizing for them, even though there's nothing to apologize for, and we should stand up for the things that we believe in. And it's time for our elected officials to do the same, to go out there and speak with confidence about our vision for the country. Additionally, the Democratic Party itself, its social media has rebranded. Here you can see rebranded, that they changed their logo. I think it's clean. I think it's nice. They also have been changing their rhetoric on social media. Here's a couple tweets. The ugly ass truck post. Uh, Not only the kind of like grifting type tweets like that, but also like I think better visuals and better ways about countering Trump's policies here. Um, for example, this tweet here. Um, I think that this is good. I think we need to be snappier with our messaging, and I think the Democratic Party is in need of a rebranding. I think the Democratic brand has been toxic, and that is the main reason why we lost the last election. Because if you look at poll after poll after poll, for the vast majority of Democratic positions, the majority of the American public agrees with the Democratic Party on the individual positions, but then they don't go and support the Democratic Party. I think that's a branding issue. I think we have let the Republicans frame who the Democratic Party is, and Democrats really need to retake the narrative forcefully and confidently and lead and seize this moment. Um, we'll see if any of this goes anywhere or if leadership gets their act together or if this is a brilliant, purposeful strategy, and maybe in a year we'll kind of realize that, and then at that point I'll give Chuck and Hakeem a pat on the back. But at this moment, I'm not so convinced, and it just again seems like Democrats are all talk, no bite, and any shutdown happening now, of course, the shutdown is bad, and of course, we should try to avoid a shutdown. But the CR, the continuing resolution, is not a good. It's gutting programs and funding for lots of governmental programs, including for veterans. What are we doing? We shouldn't be supporting this. We have an easier side for this on messaging and leverage. They need Democrats to pass this bill in the Senate. Republicans control every branch of government, both houses of Congress. It is so easy to blame it on them. And it wouldn't be wrong to do that because it would be their fault. So it doesn't even think that Democrats are like Chuck is thinking strategically here. I'm not sure what the point is. Even if it did end up being a Democratic blunder somehow, which I don't believe that it would be, I think the median American voter would see, oh, Trump's in office and the government shut down, and that was quick. That like between him getting office and the government shutting down, I think a lot of people would naturally attribute um, it to Trump. The median voter would. And I think it's easier for Democrats to make that case. And even if it was a blunder, um, the Democrats have time to recover. It just it doesn't make sense, and the Democratic Party really needs to read the moment and read the room. Otherwise, they are going to be caught flat-footed. Um, so yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about this week. If you have any points or of discussion on this topic or anything to add, I would be fascinated in hearing it because I I want to see what people think about what the party's doing and where we're at because it just I was hopeful that the party was starting to get its act together and potentially what like Shia was saying with the strategy was the case. But then with the shutdown situation, I'm not as convinced anymore. Or if that was a strategy, they've completely dropped the ball on it. So, uh, yeah, we'll see what happens. And thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe, leave a like, and make sure to watch my last video. I will be publishing another weekly recap next Monday morning as well. So thank you so much for watching. Take care, please.